All right, good morning, everybody. Some of you might know me. I've been in this space for sort of 5 or 6 years, that being the blockchain space, and I've got to tell you that a lot of conferences feel, at this stage, a bit predictable and repetitive in that arena, and so I'm quite excited to be here because I feel like I'm at the beginning of something completely new, and I really believe that NFTs have the potential to essentially allow us to reimagine life in the digital age. So I want to say thanks to Jody and Cameron and the rest of the team for having the vision to put this thing on, for inviting me to be a part of that. Now, before I tell you about why NFTs are important, I have to apologize to those of you who thought that this early session with this journalist guy was going to be a light-hearted, non-technical look at the state of things, because I'm going to have to start with a rather technical description of the structure of the internet. And I'm going to tell you that the internet is, if I can get my clicker to work. It's not working. Nope. Is made of cats. And this click is a little sensitive. There we go. So it's made of cats. Now that's something of a contestable idea, I know, and some of you might disagree with that, but let me break it down for you. I'm not talking about Internet 1.0. That is the framework around which the internet was built. That was built by a bunch of nerds in Stanford and MIT and DARPA and places like that. And essentially, yes, that's made of wires and Ethernet ports and TCP/IP and a bunch of protocols, that sort of thing, right? I'm talking about the Internet 2.0, the internet as we popularly understand it now. Right? That internet is a big global forum of content. This is the internet that emerged after we figured out how to make money on it, and that internet is most definitely made of cats. It's also made of, sorry, there we go, dogs, babies. I might see if I can get another clicker. And Michael Jordan crying, and this strange sort of three-way love triangle problem. What I'm saying to you is that the internet is made of memes. And when I say that, I'm not just referring to this new cute way of crowdsourced humor that we've come to understand, but rather the word as it was invented by Richard Dawkins, who told us that memes are like genes, right? And he had this big, expansive idea. Genes, he said, are the building block of evolution. They compete with each other to combine and then live on in perpetuity, replicating and reproducing themselves inside living bodies. Memes, he said, are a kernel of knowledge, like this basic idea that also compete with each other to combine and form part of the body of human knowledge and understanding. In essence, what he was talking about is the evolution of our culture. And that it's a really kind of interesting idea because it gives us a way to think about how the internet might be valuable. And the early ideas, the early romantic vision of the internet, Internet 1.0, was that we would have this big global forum of information in which ideas could compete with no gatekeepers, no censorship, a fully open system, right? Unfortunately, that romantic vision is not how things turned out in Internet 2.0, where we have gatekeepers. All right, I'm going to have to get another clicker, I'm sorry. Oh, next slide, please, thanks. Google, Amazon, Facebook, and Apple, right? You guys are aware of these guys. They are essentially the people, the institutions that tell us what we can read, when, and how, right? Now, with the help from, say, Twitter and a few others, right? This is essentially the way in which information is ordered and prioritized in this Internet 2.0 era. They are the gatekeepers. And essentially, that's a problem, because if ideas are going to compete with each other to rise to ascendancy and sort of become part of this ongoing positive evolution of knowledge, then they're not competing on their own terms to be part of what we accept as humanity. They're competing to live by the terms of the algorithms, secret algorithms that these guys in closed, siloed settings actually build for themselves in their interest, not necessarily in our interest, right? So this is a problem. And let me give you an example of why that's a problem. Back in 2016, during the US election, we had some guys in Veles, this town in Macedonia, who figured out that they could actually make a lot of money by steering traffic back to their websites simply by making shit up, right? They produced stories like Donald Trump endorsed by Pope Francis, and they placed it very specifically in echo chambers, in Facebook groups that were specifically designed around passionate Republicans who are really much in favor of Trump. And of course, enthused by this idea, they repeated them, they shared them, they tweeted them, they liked them. This whole thing moved around in an ongoing viral-like method of pro-communication. And essentially, it meant that these guys were able to outcompete the biggest news organizations in the world who spend money on journalists and lawyers and the like to get the story right just by lying. But it's Facebook that created this opportunity, because Facebook's algorithm creates like audiences that essentially are built so that advertisers can know that there's going to be this consistent churn of information through these passionate people who share the same ideas. That is a big problem when it comes to democracy, as we now know. But it's not the only way in which this problem exists. In fact, this is a problem that extends across our entire existence in the 21st century economy. We live in the attention economy, right? All these competing ideas, this massive, abundant amount of information is essentially competing for the one scarce resource that matters, and that is our time, our attention. We are all being geared toward looking at screens and trying to absorb amongst all this information that's competing for our attention, and it starts at a very young age. And it's problematic because nobody wins in this. Advertisers are having to deal with the fact that those siloed algorithms, those siloed controlling gatekeeping systems create black holes where we have no idea where this information is coming from. And as a result, you get fake ad data, fake views, fake likes. Advertisers have no idea what they're actually, whether they can trust the information they're receiving. Publishers, as I just said, are competing, despite the money they spend on getting the story right, with kids in Macedonia. And we, the users, are bombarded with ads that we don't want to see, and as a result are turning on ad blockers. That means that the publishers aren't getting paid, which is just incentivizing them to do really bad journalism. We have a big problem. And I hate to do this at this time of the morning, but things actually get worse. I don't know how many of you have read The Age of Surveillance Capitalism. Let's see if we can get this slide. Next slide, please. The Age of Surveillance Capitalism is a rather scary book. I recommend you read it, but if you do, read it with a stiff drink next to you, because it's talking about the state of our world as it is right now. And what Shoshana Zuboff says is that, unlike what Bruce Schneier said, who said that we are Facebook's product in his attempt to convince us that we were not Facebook's customer, she says that we are GAFA's quarry, that these institutions are mining our behavior. Our behavior is the data that they use to essentially then create their own algorithms that are themselves predictive and modify our behavior going forward. Essentially, we're losing human agency. I hate to say it, but it's as if we're living in the Matrix, right? So this is a big problem. How did we get here? And if I can just get the next slide, gone too far. Back one, please. Nope, it's not there. Okay. So how did we get here? And how did we, and what does it have to do with NFTs? And how do we fix it, right? So the starting point for this is to recognize that information is often extremely valuable. In opposition to this idea that information on the internet wants to be free, it turns out it's very valuable. Money itself is just a form of information, and data aggregated in these organizations is clearly very valuable. It's the new oil, we are told. And on top of that, content is oftentimes extremely valuable. Beyonce makes often $1 million from each Instagram post, right? And when human beings are sharing valuable information with each other, a trust problem emerges. We can't process whether or not the other individual is lying to us. Is the information true is one question, but another one is like, if you're providing exclusive information to me, how do I know that you haven't shared it with somebody else? Right? This is the double spend problem, and it came to Bitcoin that Satoshi Nakamoto was trying to solve. So now we have a new way of dealing with this problem, and that is that blockchain allows us to process information amongst each other, share it with each other, without having to rely on these intermediating institutions to resolve that trust problem for us. So for the first time, instead of relying on an intermediary to vouch for the information on our behalf, we have this decentralized network that can do it for us. But the other aspect of this is how do we actually track and trace the information itself? How do we map it? How do we define what that information is? And this is where NFTs are really important. They are, for the very first time, a chance for us to identify claims on unique pieces of information in the internet age, which is why I'm going to say that Internet 3.0 is also made of cats. So CryptoKitties was laughed at by a lot of the mainstream media as some sort of classic little trivial thing that the crypto world was interested in. It was really a profound breakthrough. For the first time, we were able to create digital scarcity. And this idea extends in many respects from what Bitcoin first brought us, which was the idea of a digital asset. We didn't have scarcity in the digital realm until Bitcoin came along. And now we have 21 million Bitcoins only to be produced by the end of its own life cycle. Now, that is a big deal. Digital scarcity for the very first time, because before this, it was assumed that anything could be replicated on the internet. But Bitcoins are fungible, right? One Bitcoin can be substituted for another one, just as a dollar can be substituted for another dollar. When it came to NFTs, these are non-fungible tokens. So now we have a claim on a piece of information that is unique. It's a one of a kind. It is a map, a specific identifier of a piece of information. And it's incredibly powerful because now we can take software, smart contracts, things like that, and start to incorporate it into the world of information and value. Give you an example. This is Honu, the crypto kitty that was a cross between a turtle and a cat, that raised $140,000 for ocean conservation because the collector that wanted to own this could now invest that money in this concept and take it forward through smart contracts into saving the oceans. So, one way to think about this is what it means from a legal perspective, right? Lawyers basically said that when the internet came along, we couldn't apply what was known as the first sale doctrine in the offline world. In that world, even though copyright was this intangible intellectual property concept, if it resided inside a physical vessel like a book or an LP, I had the right to resell it, right? It wasn't contestable. The problem was in the internet world, where anything in an anonymous environment could be just replicated easily, lawyers said, look, this isn't going to work. So we couldn't do this. And essentially what you have now is the license to use digital content rather than own and sell it. So when you have Spotify, for example, that's what you have, a license to use. You're not going to own that money, those assets, that content that's passing down through Spotify. And of course, this means that the platforms, the streaming platforms, have all the power. So one of the reasons why musicians are really interested in things like NFTs and blockchain, they feel as if this is a chance for them to actually interact directly with their fans. And that's a really powerful idea. Artists are also excited about this, especially if you combine smart contracts with this collectability function that can now be applied to claims on content. So I'm an artist, I sell my piece of work for $10,000, but if there's a token attached to that that says I'm going to get more money in the future for future sales, I'm now essentially invested in the ongoing life of this growing valuable piece of art. And it can apply to physical art or it can apply to rare pepes, right? We now have this idea of having collectible digital art, right? This is a big, big change. But it's in gaming where things kind of get pretty powerful, and it's one of the reasons why I think at this event you're going to find a lot of folks talking about the power of gaming. Games are interesting because gamers have already gotten used to the idea of buying and selling virtual goods. But those virtual goods have to reside under the current architecture within the platforms themselves. They are dependent upon the rule sets of that particular software. What gets interesting is when we can take those virtual assets and move them outside of the platform. And the reason why I think this is important, beyond the fact that it's kind of fun to do, is that we are in the process of building out virtual worlds that are going to be very important, from everything from our entertainment environment to how remote surgery is done. The future of our virtually real world will depend upon the capacity to reward and incentivize people to start building it. NFTs can play a big role in that. But when it gets really interesting is when we bring the real world in contact with this concept. And this is where I think environmental issues and social good become very powerful. So in Manila Bay, crypto incentives were used, crypto tokens, to get people to pick up their trash and clean up this horrible mess that was in the bay. What if a specific token could be rewarded for people for doing this, that a brand could now attach their name to? This is more powerful than traditional advertising and saying that, I'm Patagonia and I support environmental causes. My money is literally, in that case, going toward the reward and incentivization of positive acts that I support. It's a much healthier environment between advertiser and consumer than that world of ads and ad blockers that I was describing before. So, there's a lot of big ideas in this. It's now time, I would say, to make it real. And in doing so, my hope is that it's not just crypto dreamers who build these wonderful solutions to how the world is going to grow, but actually real companies making real things. So I have a company called Streambed Media, which has just launched. We are a next-generation video distribution and production company. We're making digital content, and we believe that digital content should be, from the very start, built upon this kind of architecture, blockchain and NFT and the like. That this is the future, and we need to own it as a media company. And I'm saying that other companies and everything need to be doing the same thing. So let's enjoy the rest of the day and talk about this, because there are so many ways in which this can be taken forward. Let's make it real. Thanks very much.